Welcome, everyone. This is our second webinar about election integrity in New Hampshire. I'm not sure if it's the sequel or the prequel, because one of our speakers today, Ed Naile, has been dealing with election integrity issues for many, many years, and he's going to share some of his war stories with you and let you know a little bit more about some of the problems he's seen over the years in our state. So before we get started, though, again, a little bit of housekeeping. Everyone is currently on mute. Those of you who are going to be speaking are unmuted or able to unmute. Everybody else will be on mute until we start Q&A. There will be a Q&A. It says there will not be a Q&A. There will be a Q&A. We will unmute you at that time or give you the ability to unmute. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments or any information you'd like to share, please feel free to use the chat. You can also send follow-up questions to us at info@603alliance.org, and copies of the slides in PDF format will be posted at 603alliance.org along with the video. So with that, I just want to share a little bit about who we are. I think many of you are familiar with the 603 Alliance. We were founded in 2015. Our mission is to restore constitutional principles at all levels of government. We are an all-volunteer organization. Many of our activities have centered around training candidates for state representative. We held a Trump inaugural ball in 2017 and raised over $5,000 for the Liberty House, which is a transitional housing for homeless veterans. We have hosted book release events with James O'Keefe. We did a Steve Bannon dinner. We've had Trevor Loudon and other prominent conservative speakers. You can learn more about us and sign up for email updates at 603alliance.org. We hope you'll do that. There's a lot that we're sharing tonight, but as new information comes out, that's going to be the best way to stay in touch with what's going on, what other events we're holding, and how you can get involved. So this is our agenda for tonight. We're going to start out with a brief announcement about a special event coming up 1 week from this evening. We're going to hear from Ken Eyring, who's going to give us an update on the Windham situation. Many of you probably were at our first webinar on that. It is posted online. You can find it at 603alliance.org. But a lot has transpired since then, and Ken is going to give us the details on that. Then we're going to hear from Ed Naile. And if you have not heard Ed Naile speak before, it is always eye-opening and always entertaining. So Ed's going to talk about the kinds of things that he's uncovered over the years, and a little bit about how you can get involved and how you can start taking action in your local community to try to uncover election integrity issues in your city or town. We will briefly talk about next steps and coming attractions, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So I'd like to begin by announcing a webinar that we are going to be holding 1 week from tonight, 7 p.m. next Thursday. This will be on something called critical race theory. If you are not familiar with critical race theory, it is a very important issue. If you have heard people speak about white privilege, white fragility, and the problem or the need to eradicate whiteness, these are some of the kinds of divisive ideas that are being taught in New Hampshire public schools, in state agencies, and elsewhere that are really calling for us to judge people based on the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. So it is a very hot topic right now, largely because of House Bill 544, which was filed by a good friend of ours, Keith Ammon. HB 544 would essentially prohibit the teaching of these divisive concepts. It would prohibit teaching that one race is superior to another. It would prohibit teaching that one gender is inherently superior to another. It would move us away from these kind of identity politics agendas that are being taught currently. Our speaker will be Dr. Karlin Borisenko. She rose to prominence about a year ago when she attended a Trump rally. She was a Democrat. She lives in Merrimack. Many of her friends warned her against the dangers of going to a Trump rally and being near those people. And she wrote about her experience on Medium.com. That went viral. She has since appeared on Forbes.com. She's been on the Glenn Beck program a number of times. And several weeks ago, she broke a story about Coca-Cola and the teachings at some of the employee training programs at Coca-Cola, urging employees to figure out a way to be less white. So she has really kind of become, as she said, an accidental political commentator. She wasn't terribly involved before, but her inclinations were very left-leaning. So her story is a very interesting one, and she's going to be our primary presenter. We will also have Keith Ammon, who's the primary sponsor of HB 544, on to talk a little bit more about what's in the bill and exactly what it says, because there's some misinformation floating around out there. So you can register for that for free. Go to 603alliance.org, and it is the article at the top of the page. With that, let's talk about election integrity. First order of business is Ken Eyring. And Ken, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what happened in Windham, what's happened since, and where you see it going now?
Okay, thanks, Jim. And I just want to thank up front all the directors on 603 Alliance. It's a great organization. It takes a lot of time, effort, money to run a first-class organization like you guys do. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come on and share the story about what's going on down here in Windham. So what happened? Well, just very briefly, on November 3rd in the general election, the results on that night in our state rep race had 4 open seats, and we had 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats running for that. The 4 Republicans won, but the 4th place Republican only won by 24 votes. So the first place Democrat challenged and asked for a recount, and that 24 vote discrepancy grew to 420 votes. All 4 Republicans gained about 300 votes, and that leading Democrat lost 99 votes. So from a 0.005% margin of loss, that went to 9.6%. And that had a lot of people concerned, and we wanted to get answers. And our Board of Selectmen sent a letter to the AG's office asking for an investigation. The Ballot Law Commission sent a letter to the AG's office asking for an investigation. There were no responses. Our selectmen sent a second letter to the AG's office, and there were no responses to that either. Subsequent to that, Senator Bob Guida and Dr. Dave Strang, myself, worked together to try to raise awareness. I also worked with a gentleman down here in Windham. His name is Tom Murray. And we had multiple projects going on at the same time to raise awareness, to gather data, and to kind of put things into perspective. So last month to the day was the last webinar that the 603 Alliance put on. As Jim said, is it a prequel or a sequel? And that day, SB 43 was passed, and that, quote, authorized the AG and the Secretary of State to do an audit of Windham's election from November 3rd. And I just want to give a huge amount of kudos to Senator Guida for pushing that bill through. He actually wrote an amendment that became the text for SB 43. He got it through the Senate with a 24-0 vote. And when the language was written, it was just a little bit too broad, even by what Senator Guida had expected. So there was a lot of interest from House reps to amend the bill with input from Senator Guida, Dave Strang, and myself. And there was some concern that there was so many different changes that might be made that we were concerned that maybe the bill might get retained in committee because there would be too much that was tried to be done in such a short period of time. So I had reached out to Secretary of State Bill Gardner the day before the hearing, which was almost 2 weeks ago. And I spoke with him for 3 hours, and I was surprised and very pleased that he supported a lot of what it was that we wanted to do that wasn't in the bill. We were looking for a complete and thorough forensic audit of the machines and their memory cards, and also of the ballots. And his concern and his objections to the original bill was that it was asking that he perform a second recount of the same race. And by law, he is prevented from doing that. Now, all of us, meaning myself, Dr. Strang, Senator Gaida, and many, many people across the state and even across the country, we were looking at this as an audit, not a recount. But he was looking at that as if it were just semantics. So we came to terms, and we presented that to the election law committee, and we got a tremendous amount of support from the chair, Barbara Griffin. My sincere thanks to her and to all of the election law committee members. That amendment was they took the language that myself and Secretary Gardner had spoken about, putting together a plan. They turned that into an amendment, and that was accepted, and that replaced the full text of Senate Bill 43, and it came out 20-0. Both the Democrat and a Republican suggested that it be put on the consent calendar. So that's what the plans are right now.
The speaker.
What's that? I spoke with a member of the election law committee today. They said the next time they're going to meet is, I believe, the first Wednesday in April, and he believes that it will be voted on then, if not on that Wednesday, on the Thursday, and they hope that it can fast track through the Senate and get on the governor's desk fairly quickly. Nice thing about the bill is that we're going to get a forensic audit of the machines and the ballots. They're also going to do a recount of Rockingham County District 7, which is Windham State Representative's race. And in addition to that, there'll be 3 forensic analysts brought in order to oversee that process. They will be given complete autonomy as to how that process is run. Today, where we are today is, as I said, we're waiting for SB 43 to be worked on by the House. Now, an important message of all of this is that we're winning. We, the people, are winning. There was a tremendous amount of support from everyone, with emails, with calls to the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Governor's office. Multiple times during the hearing, some of the state reps had mentioned that it was very difficult to find emails in their inboxes regarding other bills that they also had to comment on that day. But that shows that the amount of support that came in on this bill was very important, and it helped move our concerns forward. So, when we speak with one loud voice, people listen, and that's how representative government is supposed to be. So what's next? We're not done. There is language in the bill that if somebody did not want to follow the intent, they could do so. But to quote a very popular recent president, he used the term "stand down, stand by." And I think that's appropriate here. I think that we're going to need to be prepared to make our voices heard again when it comes time to select the forensic analysts. Right now, jointly the Secretary of State and the Attorney General will pick one. The Windham Board of Selectmen is designated to pick a second, and then together, jointly, their analysts will pick a third. And so as long as we get a forensic analyst who is qualified and capable for thoroughly analyzing our machines and the ballots, then we're going to be good. We're going to be golden. We're going to get everything we want. So we need to keep an eye on that process to make sure that we get the right people in place. Now, the Secretary of State has been wonderful. He's included me in the process. We've spoken half a dozen times in the past 2 weeks over quite a few hours collectively. And he's offered, and in fact wants me and has invited me to be part of the process of picking me, of sharing my thoughts with the analysts that he's talking with. So I think that that's, very encouraging. He's to be quite honest, he's not the man that I thought he was going into this. He's turned out to be very honorable, very professional, very principled, and I feel like I've known this man for years, and he's someone that I feel we can trust, and I'm looking forward to moving this process forward. So with my last statement is that a lot of people have reached out to me saying, what can I do to help? And that's important because at times we need to get people to help with just getting involved with either helping with small tasks or just making their voices heard in a relatively short period of time. So if you want to help, please send me an email. You can see my email address is up there. It's ken@intrinetsystems.com. And just in the subject line, write Windham election integrity, so I don't skip by it. I get way too many emails to actually look at all of them. But if you want to help, your help would be greatly appreciated. And I believe I gave kudos to Dr. Dave Strang and Tom Murray and Senator Guida, but I think it's important to do that one more time because of the enormous amount of time and effort that they all put in. So thanks a lot for the 603 Alliance, again, for the time to get up here, to talk, to share the story. And I look forward to the next month where this audit will get kicked off, hopefully, and reveal the answers that we've been looking for.
Thank you, Ken. I guess I want to just follow up on one or 2 points you made. One is that you mentioned it's going on the consent calendar or likely to go on the consent calendar. Just to let everybody understand what that means is that it is most likely, essentially the committees the committee has flagged it as a bill that it's unlikely that many people, if anyone, would object to it in a House vote. So it's likely to be included in a large number of bills that are voted on at the beginning of the session. So that's a good sign. I think that happened really because of all of you. It happened because you let people know that you care about this. I think likewise, there's a bunch of questions in the chat. We'll try to get to some of those later. But I think the overall sense is we can't let down our guard. And I think, Ken is on the case. David Strang is on the case. Tom Murray, others are on the case, and I have faith that they will make sure that this gets done right. But they do need your backup. And so if you send Ken an email, we will certainly send out updates. I will also point out the Granite Grok link up near the top of the slide here. Links directly to Ken's articles on Granite Grok. So you'll see the most recent ones first if you go to that link. And he is regularly providing updates on Granite Grok as well as to an email list that he's maintaining. There is a question about the email address. Yes, it is ken@intranet systems. It's not internet systems, it's intranet systems. So the spelling there is correct. So yeah, I know Ken and David and others are absolutely committed to a fully transparent, authentic investigation. And again, you're all you should all be taking credit for helping to make that happen. So thank you, Ken. Also wanted to give a very brief update about something else that came up on our previous webinar. So James O'Keefe spoke on our previous webinar, and he mentioned this gentleman, Vincent Marzello, who has pled guilty to voting twice in the 2016 general election. The AG's office sat on that information for 9 months, and it was only when James O'Keefe showed up at their office with a video camera that they finally went out and arrested him. Ironically, it was on the date of our last webinar, 1 month ago today, that Vincent Marzello was finally sentenced. This is what he got: 90 days in prison, suspended for 2 years, which effectively means he's getting 0 days in prison. He got a fine of $3,000, which was reduced to $300, and if he behaves well, he will the remainder of that will be suspended also. So, it's frustrating that this is the result, but it's we've got to make these things more public. We've got to make sure that we get the word out. And again, I think all of you have a role in helping to make that happen. Next up, Ed Naile, Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers, is a group based out of Concord. Ed has been at this for many, many years, and it's hard to do an introduction about Ed because he does so much, but he fights for the little guy. He's one of the people I call when I hear about something happening in a city or town in New Hampshire where somebody is getting the short end of the stick. Ed and I dealt with one of those yesterday and today. Actually got it resolved in 2 days, which is pretty remarkable. But Ed has really been a champion for regular people here in the state, and definitely a guy who's paid a lot of attention to voter fraud, voter election integrity issues. So Ed, I'm going to just turn it over to you and let you tell your stories.
Jim, thanks a lot. He told me how many people were listening, and you guys were mostly newbies, people that would like to get involved. And you can see the injustice that's unfolding before us every day regarding election laws. And like this gentleman before who paid a $300 fine, I didn't see anything in there about him losing his ability to vote. When you violate election laws, usually you lose your ability to vote after that. Teach you a lesson. But I think my best bet is start you off with, I have a long history since like 1988 of being involved in taxpayer issues in New Hampshire, unwillingly. I was kind of drug into this because of the town that I live in. And once I saw that that a lot of what goes on in some small towns that are not, let's say, operating lawfully, where they take advantage of a little guy, land deals, bid deals, you name it. Stuff will go on in these small towns, and you think you can resolve it, and it's difficult. And when I set out to do this in my town, I said, I'll clean it up. There's a couple of people who shouldn't be in office, and maybe we can straighten this out and do things properly. I was totally frustrated over and over and over again. And then it dawned on me, the state is protecting the individuals in the town pulling this stuff off. So I figured, after winning a right to know case in my town, I got a little notoriety, and I was invited to meetings of different organizations at the time. And Granite State Taxpayers was out there holding events, and I was invited to one of those and ran into Chuck Douglas and a lot of different activists and people that were involved in politics at that time, back, let's say 1992, something like that. And hooked up with those guys, and with Granite State Taxpayers, we did a lot of under the dome type stuff. And I just wasn't interested in legislation and lobbying and all that. I wanted to stick with the little guy in the towns and the municipalities. And I, in Granite State Taxpayers, I got to meet people like Howard Dilworth and Jim Powell and some other guys that, Harriet Cady, individuals that were more or less locally involved, with their planning and zoning and water commissions, the hundreds of issues involved in running a small town. And I worked on that. I was around when we created Senate Bill 2, which was a very successful push by Granite State Taxpayers back then. And eventually went on to join up with a bunch of guys and start the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. And we're mostly municipal. So the mind-numbing, excruciating detail that goes into zoning and planning and school budgets, town budgets, budget committees, you name it. Dog catcher issues. It doesn't matter what it is. Something will crop up for you in municipal issues, working in towns. schools, counties, cities. So I got involved in that. And we heard over and over and over again after elections all about all the voter fraud that was going on. And okay. I'm aware of it. And we finally, in 2000, we said, let's have a meeting. And anybody in the state of New Hampshire has got some evidence of voter fraud, bring it. So we met in upstairs somewhere in Concord at a rented office. I think Chris Wood was there, Karen Testerman, maybe a dozen people altogether. I still have the notes from it. And we said, okay, what does everybody have? And kaboom on the table, Harriet Cady drops some returned envelopes from the town of Deerfield from 2000. And they were people who voted from a location that did not exist in town. It was Bear Brook Road. And it was, I think, 146, something like that. Bear Brook Road was the address of 19 people who voted from there. And the envelopes, when they mailed to them, came back undeliverable. And she gave them to me. So I'm looking at these things. I started looking up the individuals involved with it. And it turns out it was an AmeriCorps bus. And these were people from out of state and maybe a couple from out of town that were taken with this bus. And it was an AmeriCorps bus. I don't know whether they rented a bus, whether they owned a bus, but it was a bus that carried 19 people and the driver. And it went to Deerfield and they all hopped out and they voted and used a fake address. Well, the town of Deerfield's officials had handed that over to the AG and the Secretary of State multiple times to no avail, and they gave it to us. Now, when I first got involved in politics, it wasn't on the left side, it was on the hard right side. So I got a name for myself as being an adjutant and an irritant, I think the selectman called me. And I finally ran for office in 1993, I think it was. And so I got an opportunity to, put the dollar down to become a selectman. And I show up on the day of the election. Someone put a sign up in the snowbank saying that I had stolen money from the fire department. Okay, that's a nice start. And then as their people are going in to vote, hardly anybody would say anything to me. I knew a lot of these people. They just walk right past me. They go in to vote. They walk right past me when they come out and they go home. And I found out that the supervisor of the checklist was telling people not to vote for me. She knew me personally and I was a liar. So that's the supervisor of the checklist. That's the person you have to go by to vote. She'll check your name off the list. You go in, get your ballot, you vote, and you leave, and someone else checks you, and you're done. So 3 people from her church turned her in to the moderator. And there's a statute that requires him to turn that person into the AG. Well, this woman's name is Ann Lorber. And Ann wasn't happy with that. We have a cooperative school district. She did it there. So that moderator, Russ Galpin, turned her in to the AG's office, and they wrote her a letter telling her not to do that again. Basically, that was naughty. Don't do that again. No punishment whatsoever. So that leaves me hanging. I'm the guy who was called a liar to everybody who walked by to vote. And there's a sign in the snowbank saying I stole money from the fire department, and which is unbelievable. So, but that's how the town works. I mean, they have a rumor mill, they have a telephone tree, and that's how they keep control. To this day, I believe they're still at it. So anyway, the AG's office writes this letter, and it doesn't admonish her at all, really. No fine, no nothing. So that allowed her to tell people and her crowd that I had falsely accused her, and the AG's office threw it out. And that's when I became like enemy number 1 to the AG's office. I had enough of this. So I, became involved down in Concord with Granite State taxpayers and started Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers to make sure that we had other people like me wouldn't be put through the same deal, and to expose the AG's office, the elections unit, for what they are. They're basically owned by the Democrat Party. They're totally untrustworthy, and they've been doing this for a long time, very successfully. And I believe they feel they're untouchable. So they protect their own, and they do damage to people that they don't care for. And that's been the way it is, and that's the way it is now. I have an office full of documents to show that. So when this opportunity to check voter fraud came up in 2000, and we met and we got those 19 letters, in my hand was proof that the AG's office was not going to investigate AmeriCorps. That's a federally run group, organization, and they're not going to touch it, no matter what they do. Make up an address, vote from out of state, whatnot. So I started putting their names, people's names, on the internet with some derogatory comments. And I got a couple of emails back saying, you can't do this to me, blah, blah, blah. Well, yes, I can. If you'd like to sue me, you already know who I am and where you can get me. Have your father or mom's attorney contact me. Let's get this into a courtroom where I can get some discovery about you. And here we are. It's 2021. No one sued me yet from that group or any other group that I've done this with. So what I've done is I've carved out a way to expose voter fraud the best way I can. Back when I started in 2000, you could walk into a town hall and ask to see the checklist and get a copy of the checklist, any checklist, and it would be given to you. You could ask for a copy of someone's voter registration card, and here it is. They reach over in a filing cabinet, hand it to you. And it would have the person's signature, their birth date, where they lived, and it would have what party they belong to, and where they voted last. Well, through the years from 2000 till now, we have seen nothing but anything public like that has been taken away from the public. It is no longer transparent. If you have people come in, and then we had, shortly after that, we had the same-day voter registration came about, which is what I like to call same-day voter fraud. You can't keep track of who's voting if they can register and vote same day. Those documents are, the votes are cast. You can't get in there and clean them out or pick out which ones they were. You know, you suffer with the consequences. So same day voter came to New Hampshire, and we had a statewide database of voters, and that is also not open to the public. So we have a statewide voter database that I could easily check from my office and find out who's voting here, but it's not open to me. I would have to beg some candidate to let me see it, or I'd have to get it from Republican Party, Democrat Party, or a PAC that could afford to buy it. But I could not access the statewide database that taxpayers pay for on my own. I have Vermont's statewide database is updated every 30 days and emailed to me at home. I can search Connecticut, Colorado, Florida, many states. I can check them no problem through the internet. Some of them immediately right now, I could look up Connecticut or Florida, Colorado, Ohio. Some of the states are difficult, like New Hampshire. Virginia's tough. It's almost impossible to get anything there. And Michigan, in Detroit especially, if I want to track somebody in Detroit, I have to go there in person. I told them, I'll have a lawyer pick the stuff up for me. No, you have to come in person. That's kind of where we're at in New Hampshire. Everybody's afraid of HB1. I believe we're already there. I can hardly see anything of value about voters unless I get a checklist from the town. And there's been some problems. Different towns will hand it to you right off the bat. Others, you have to wait and argue with them, and which one is it? And sometimes they'll charge you an exorbitant amount for what's called a marked checklist. But for people just getting involved, it's not as easy as it used to be, but there are methods to do it. I can assure you, if you want to be successful in your town, you got to get the checklist and as many checklists as you can and keep track of them yourself. And you just sit down some evening with a bunch of different colored magic markers and go through, say, this is a steady voter. This one, I know who this person is. They would support us. And you can be very helpful to a candidate from your area. So if someone decides to run for office and they don't have a long list of previous checklists, they have to start out from scratch. But if you're a taxpayer activist in your town, somebody who's concerned with this and say, I'm willing to cough up $25 and buy the checklist and start going through it myself, you become a very valuable asset to conservative candidates. And I would highly recommend that. I had a couple things I wanted to touch on. I do have an office in Concord, and it's got records from 2000 till now. And if anyone wants to go through that and if they have any questions about anything, I can arrange that you can see anything you'd like, what a checklist looks like, what a marked checklist is like. We can get you sites you can look at. on the internet. There's different states that I talk to on a regular basis. You can confirm with them things that happen in New Hampshire. A lot of it happens in other states. This isn't unique to us. We're all facing the same thing, that we have a crush of voters showing up, and this time absentees, and a lot of it's questionable. And the only way to be sure that when you say I have someone who shouldn't be voting here is to have backup data, and keeping documents is one of the smartest things you can do. Recently, we had I used to believe that I found that we can't win in the superior courts in New Hampshire. We have one judge made up this mobile domicile thing. I haven't had much success in the way of county courts, superior courts. But I always thought we do have an opportunity to fix New Hampshire through federal courts and civil rights violation. It is not legal for the state of New Hampshire to allow people from other states to vote here. It's a 14th Amendment violation. I can't vote in Massachusetts. People from Massachusetts shouldn't be able to vote here. College students who are paying out-of-state tuition, which is proof that they do not live here or not legally domiciled here, should not be voting here. And it's very difficult to cure that with legislation, and it's difficult to do it in the courts. But the feds could easily do that. They also have legislation, or they have federal statutes, U.S. Code 52-10307. It's a crime to lie to an election official in an election for federal office, and that's never enforced. And I'll give you an example. We had 2 college students from Dartmouth last year filed a case against the state of New Hampshire for the right to vote here, where they're going to school, Dartmouth. And I thought, thank goodness, finally, this is in a federal court. And first of all, they had no standing to vote in our state. Both of these girls that were the litigants, and I believe they're suckered into this. They're convinced that this is a good thing by the firms that need somebody to be a plaintiff. Both of these girls, one is a resident of California, the other one I believe is Arkansas. So one has a California license, the other one has an Arkansas license. The girl from Arkansas was registered to vote in Arkansas. California, you can't get any information from California. So they sued in federal court with the help of the New Hampshire ACLU, and I filed a motion to intervene. I've done motion to intervene in superior courts here in New Hampshire in the past, so I was familiar with that. I filed a motion to intervene, and it was given to the federal judge. So I instantly became part of that case and the website that they give you to transfer paper with the other attorneys. So there were 2 attorneys out of New Hampshire and 2 attorneys out of New York that I was basically what you might call up against. And my arguments, I mean, I have the case and I can show that to you. But my motion to intervene would have allowed me to get into the case, and if there was a trial, to question the plaintiffs. So the judge, I thought in this case, here's a judge who's accepted a case from 2 people that have no harm done to them. One's already registered, and I imagine the other one is, in their home state. And if not, they have the right to vote in the state where they're holding driver's licenses, which they admit in the case itself. They don't even have standing to sue in New Hampshire, and the judge lets them have their case. Me, I file a motion to intervene, and after a couple of weeks, he said, I understand what you're looking for. I would prefer to see this as an amicus brief, like friend of the court. I don't want to be a friend of the court. I want to be in the court. I want to be able to cross-examine witnesses and present evidence. I've filed motions to intervene before, and they go directly to the circular file. So right before, so the judge said, okay, I'd rather you file this as an amicus brief. And, I chose not to do that. And the lawyers from the other side kind of gave me some ribbing over the internet. And here we go. So I'm thinking this would be interesting for a federal judge to say that people from California and Arkansas can vote in New Hampshire. This would be quite interesting because that would change the law for the other 49 states. And right before the case was to be heard, the ACLU and the 2 girls walked away. So I don't know whether the judge was luring them into why don't I finish this off forever and rule against you? and or he was going to allow it. So I'm torn. Right now we have no chance of a U.S. attorney coming in and helping New Hampshire and straightening this mess out. Well, the one thing we are left with is there was an issue. There was a opinion of the justices done by our state Supreme Court in August of 2018, July, something like that, of 2018, called Opinion of the Justices. And our Supreme Court said in that opinion of the justices, the first part of it is all whether or not they should have taken the case. And in the end, they say, we know of no other constitution, we know of no other laws in any of the other 49 states that allow their citizens to vote in another state. We don't have anything on our books that allow us to let our citizens vote in another state. And then they proceed to mention cases that I've been waving over my head for 20 years. Other states have dealt with people, especially college students, when we had the constitutional amendment to allow 18-year-olds to vote. All the states had to deal with that, amend their constitutions to make sure that 18-year-olds could vote. So there was a lot of court cases in state courts, federal Supreme Courts all over the country. And one is Arbach versus Retaliata. It says students, should not be voting in the state where they're going to college simply because they're going to college. They should vote where they are domiciled. And that one, there's a Pope case. There's a bunch of cases, but they quoted the same cases that I had. I don't know whether they got them out of my motion. I filed a motion in that case to join that. But we have a lot of history. The other states have gone through this. And here New Hampshire lingers on with this, because you're here in person, you have the right to vote here. And that is absolutely not true. A lot of people, politicians will swear to it, but it is absolutely not true. It is a genuine 14th Amendment violation, the Equal Protection Clause. And we had a case in 1972 called Neuberger versus Peterson. And a college student at Dartmouth, 1972, challenged that town of Durham for asking whether or not he was going to leave after he voted. And that's a separate case from a domicile case. That case is a what's called a durational residency case. All right, you can't force prevent somebody from voting or prevent somebody from leaving after they voted because of some sort of crazy duration that they stayed in or shall stay in the state. It has to genuinely support some value in the state to say, okay, people that moved here 5 days before shouldn't be voting in these elections. Vote where they came from. There's provisions for that federal law. So in 1972, the federal court that heard this Neuberger versus Peterson said no. The town of Durham, Hanover, where Dartmouth College is, they can't ask people how long they're going to stay or anything like that. But in the next to the last paragraph, I believe it is, that the court said that they understand the problem with college voters in these small towns, that they could swamp the town and the residents who actually live there lose their representation. And they basically said that that the student who has not left his previous residence, abandoned it, and the state that he came from no longer recognizes him, should not be voting in New Hampshire. So if you have a driver's license from Connecticut, Connecticut recognizes you as a citizen. Connecticut has a state income tax. Connecticut keeps track of the people who owe the tax by their driver's licenses. If you have a registered car in Connecticut and you move somewhere else, you have 72 hours to let the state know that you've re-registered cars somewhere else. It's it's pretty simple, but we've gone on for a long time with this there's some sort of a problem between two words, domicile and residence. Our Constitution says that people above the age of 18 shall vote in the town or the ward in which they are domiciled, past tense, not which they intend to be domiciled. And these AmeriCorps voters that came in and voted in Deerfield and then came back, other ones came back in 2006, I think it was, to Secretary of State Gardner's own ward in Manchester, they said, well, in my mind, I live in New Hampshire. Now I could change my mind tomorrow. That's not proof. That is not proof you live here. If you want proof of how you determine who is a citizen of the state of New Hampshire, there's a case called Every versus Madison. And it was heard in 1986. A family from Massachusetts moved to Madison, New Hampshire, bought a house, kids in school, bank accounts, driver's licenses, registered cars. But Mr. Madison stayed a teacher in Massachusetts and would drive down during the week and teach and then come back on the weekends. And the people in Madison would not let him vote because he was not in the state long enough. He went to court, Supreme Court said, no, he has every right to vote here because the evidence shows that. And all I've ever asked the state to do is, why don't you try some of these people and make them prove they're residents of the state of New Hampshire? But they don't. And that goes right to the elections unit of the state of New Hampshire's AG's unit. I think like we've had AGs in the past, they come and go, but the election unit is pretty much the same. And they've behaved the same for as long as I've been involved. I have, in 2015, the ACLU asked, the New Hampshire ACLU asked the Attorney General's office to give them a copy of all the in-person voter fraud that they have. And they turned over maybe 16, 18 cases. And I got a hold of that. I always want to thank the New Hampshire ACLU for filing a right to know, RSA 91A, right to know law against the Attorney General's office and making the investigations they've done of voter fraud public. Because they asked for everything between 2000 and 2015. That's my bailiwick right in there. That's where I've been capturing voter evidence of voter fraud for that period of time exactly. So when the ACLU asked the Attorney General's office for that and they released it, I got a chance to go through it. And I don't think of all the cases, of all the 16, 18 cases they took or investigated, let's call it an investigation, which it isn't. The story was the same. They had a report that somebody voted in 2 towns. We went to their house. We knocked on the door. The person answered and said, no, I didn't do that. That's the end. Only in one of the cases could I find something where they asked for the person's driver's license for identification. And in that wad of paperwork, there was a letter from Maine, from the state of Maine. It says, here's the name of 30 people we believe are Maine residents illegally voting in New Hampshire. I have that copy. And New Hampshire never responded to that letter that I can see. So this has been going on a long time. Now, because of Wyndham, God bless them, that they put in all this work and they basically caught lightning in a jar down in Wyndham. It's opened the eyes, and then the federal election have opened the eyes of people in everywhere that this has to be fixed. And I'm looking at a lot of people that are interested in doing this. It's not as easy to track it as it was, but now's the time to do it. I mean, it's like if you're going surfing, you got to wait for a wave. You can't surf when the ocean's flat. You need a wave, and we have a wave coming right now. And even if you don't win this, I think getting involved in it is one of the smartest things you can do. It'll be highly educational, and if you catch people like I do, or get to debate somebody on the other side, it's highly entertaining. I wanted to point out too. I got in 1991 when I won my right to know case, my first right to know case against my town. I ran into a retired FBI agent back when the FBI was trustworthy, 25, 30 years ago. And I ran into this FBI agent and he said, I'm going to give you advice on how to beat a municipality. Here's my secret advice. Make them do their job. And I found that is exactly how you get things done. You go through the statutes, you go through the constitutions, you go through common sense, and you take these people and make them do their job. Because most of the laws and the constitutions were written with a lot of historical context. Like we know that you take a group of people and you got good and bad. And everybody has a chance to get elected. Everybody has a chance to be a department head or in some position of power and abuse it. And if you want to get them out, or you want your town to run correctly, or your state, or your country, make them do their job. If they don't, it's even easier to get after them. If they do, isn't that what you wanted in the first place? But you got to be persistent. You got to be tough, and you have to have documentation. I mean, there's two scales on justice, and you got to put your paperwork on there and make it hit hard. That back up what you say, be sure of what you say, and the other thing is getting involved with other, like 603 Alliance is great. Putting on these seminars, highly endorse them. This is the way to reach out and touch people that are sometimes afraid to. I used to say in my town, people say, I can't stand up and speak in public like you. I said, well, I never could till I started. And now I'm not afraid of, I don't care how many people are in the audience, 50,000, I don't care. But if I started telling people that you were burying pollution in your yard, would you stand up and protect yourself? Yes. Well, do this. I mean, just pretend that's the issue. Do something. But if you can't speak up, work with other people who can. You're going to find a couple people in your town or your group, or start a group that are willing to. I'll take this part. I'll speak in public. You do the numbers. Somebody else collect the documents. Some people can write, and it only takes actually a handful of people. An organization like a small group that wants to get something accomplished. It's not about having 75 directors. It's about having 6 to 8 motivated people. And I know you're out there. They told me how many people are on this webinar tonight. I know you're out there. I have the office, like I said, full of documentation. I got to get it out and inventory it here shortly. And if anybody wants to come see this stuff, I'll gladly pop the doors open, lay it all out on the table. And this is so hard. The other thing is, I went down to Grover Norquist is a taxpayer activist down in D.C. He runs Americans for Tax Reform. And I went down 2 years ago to his what's called the Wednesday meeting. And like 100 people from all across the country show up in person, and some of it's on phone, I think. But they had Tom Fitton was there from his group. And Grover was standing behind Grover, and Grover said, all right, Tom, what do you have going on? And he said, well, we're doing this and we're doing that. And when we're done, we're going to start on voter fraud. And at Grover's meetings, you have like 15, 20 seconds to make sense or you're cut off. So he asked Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch, that's the organization he's from. He asked Tom Fitton, well, explain it to me. And he started to explain, and you can't do this in 15 seconds. You can't do this in an hour, explain voter fraud. So I leaned out, and he said, Grover looked over, he said, New Hampshire's here, let them do it. And I said, we just had an election in the state of New Hampshire where 5,313 people voted same day with an out-of-state driver's license. And 10 months later, those people still had not gotten a driver's license in New Hampshire. And we have a U.S. senator is sitting in a Senate down here in New Hampshire after she won that election by 1,017 votes. And that's all I had to say. And I got it out. And a bunch of reporters came over to get information and whatnot. But it's complicated. It'd be best to pick an issue like your town, like the Windham people have this machine ballot issue. Everybody can understand it. I have the people from out of state that I catch voting here. You send certified letters to where they used to live. It returned, no forwarding address. That's solid proof that I can say whatever I want about those people and question why they voted here. And some of them, I believe we're going to start calling them at home where they've moved to and try and interview them on live radio. We've tried this before, and they don't pick up. And we even tried different area codes to get them to pick up. But we're gonna be trying that. We'll get one of them one of these days. My job is in New Hampshire, since I can't count on the courts. I can't count on the AG. No way. The Secretary of State's been no help. I've carved out a way to do this myself, and I can show other people how to do it in your town. Or if you're afraid, send me the tips you have, and I'll work them. Some of the best catches we have were tips from other towns. So, and the other thing is, when we do catch people, they are tapped on the wrist, like this gentleman that went back and voted as a woman. We caught some people. I got a guy named Jared Stephen Cram. We caught him voting here illegally in New Hampshire in 2008 and 2012. I have his complete voting record from Pennsylvania, and he voted in every election in the general election in Pennsylvania, except those 2 years. And he is he's an attorney, and he works to train people. He's a member of the Democrat Party in Philadelphia, and he trains people for challenging voters, whatnot. He's a absolute guaranteed 100% political activist in Pennsylvania. And all I could do with him was I turned him into the state of Pennsylvania. He had to drive out to Harrisburg and explain, how this happened, and they slap on the wrist. And we caught another guy, but Jared Stephen Cram doesn't vote here anymore. The other one we caught was Carl Gibson of the prominent ones. Carl Gibson was here in New Hampshire working for Bernie Sanders in 2015, and he got caught pretending to be Yvonne Dean Bailey by changing her name and making it into a Twitter account and saying that Yvonne Dean Bailey, who was running for a special election seat, was dropping out of the race. He did this on a Thursday. So that means people would have seen that and go, I'm not going to go out and vote for Yvonne because she dropped out of the race. That's called voter suppression. That's what he was arrested for. A reporter from the Concord Monitor saw like Yvonne Dean Bailey or something like that. He just changed the couple of letters and called him up and said, what's going on? He said, I had too many beers. It was a joke. So he admitted he did it to the Concord Monitor reporter. And the AG's office arrested him. They didn't take his computer. They didn't take any evidence. They didn't take any statements. Nothing. They arrested him, and he'd been here since 2012. He was helping run a campaign against Frank Ginta in Manchester in 2012, and he was registered in 3 or 4 other states. But he's from Kentucky, and that's where his driver's license was. So he's living in this apartment in Concord. He pulls this stunt. And you see in the newspapers, Concord man arrested for, voter suppression. Well, they find out he's a Democrat activist. I mean, he's all over the country, like Antifa or Black Lives Matter. He's at those types of functions. These are arrested repeatedly. So they pick him up, and what happens? They let him go on a minor forgery charge. Forgery. He committed voter suppression, rock solid. The Concord Monitor reporter wouldn't testify. Refused to testify, so the state had no quote-unquote evidence against him and basically let him go. But I can tell you, Carl is not the activist he used to be. He moved, I think he's out in Colorado, and I check him constantly to see if he's up to anything, and he's very quiet now. But he was, I believe he was paid for by Credo PAC. So he had an apartment here, he had an apartment in Minnesota. He had his car registered in Connecticut when he was working for the People's Workers Party, which is like a communist party in Connecticut, but that's where his car was from. And I checked his car, and he hadn't paid his taxes in Connecticut for 2 years, so his plates were expired. And I went to the Concord police, and Connecticut told me, hey, you should inform the local police. I said, I surely will. So I went down to Concord, and I told the cops, I got to see somebody. Don't they give me the cop that arrested Carl? He goes, I'll fix him. So he got on the computer right in front of me and put an all points bulletin, whatever they put out on him, and Carl got his car towed. So he was on foot for a while, I imagine. But him and I got a really good tip in Hooksett. A guy came in at exactly 7 o'clock. He voted. He shouldn't have been allowed to vote because he wasn't there in time. But he said he was in the bathroom. So, all right, fine, we'll let you vote. He went outside and he started rummaging through cars. He got arrested. So here's a guy that walked in, voted. He had no ID. Told the town of Hooksett, I got no ID. So, but I remember my driver's license number. Can I use that? Yeah, sure. So he votes, goes outside, gets arrested. Once he's been arrested, I own him. So I went down the next day. I got all the documents. He gave 3 different addresses. His name was Michael LaShawn Lewis. So he had just flown here from Florida to vote in Hooksett. He rented a car in Massachusetts. So he says he has no driver's license, but he managed to fly to Boston, I think it was, and rent a car and drive to Hooksett and vote with no driver's license. And the driver's license number he gave was for a valid license in Florida. So I tracked him down. He voted in Florida in October, early voting, and he voted in New Hampshire in November, same day. You remember our same day voter fraud, I call it? That's why. He voted here, but he had also voted at his home in Georgia. So the Hooksett police turned him in. The AG's office said, okay, fine. They indict him. A Merrimack County grand jury indicted Michael LaShawn Lewis voting in Florida and in New Hampshire. So, okay, fine. That's not true. He's not a Florida man. He's a Georgia man. I had all the documents on him within a day of him voting here illegally. I knew he was from Marietta, Georgia. I knew that he had gone to high school there. His criminal record is from there. Every apartment he's ever been in that he didn't pay rent for is in Atlanta area. Nothing to do with Florida. He probably used a fake Florida address like he used a fake address to vote in Hooksett. He just picked somebody's house in Hooksett and said, that's where I live. And the driver's license he had was valid, but it can't be valid for him because he lives in Georgia where he's registered to vote. I contacted Georgia. They gave me all the information on him. So he can't have a Florida license. It's probably a stolen license. So he was supposed to reappear in court in Hooksett. I waited for him. That was December of that same year, and he never showed. So apparently, the article, the press release from the AG's office says Florida man indicted. So I took everything I had on him, and the attorney general, the previous attorney general, used to live down the road from me, and I put it in his mailbox. And about 6 weeks later, we saw a press release that the Atlanta Transit Police had arrested Michael LaShawn Lewis, and he was going to be extradited to New Hampshire. So I've contacted the AG's office, and they said, "Oh no, we can't give you any information on that. Here's all we have, Mr. Naile." They sent me three documents that he's been picked up by the Atlanta Transit Police and some other stuff, but they forgot to give me the press release that says Florida man indicted for voting in 2 states. So that's how helpful they are. So I don't know how much longer you guys. You want to do any questions, Jim?
Yeah, I think actually, Ed, I think that this is perfect because I think you've covered a lot of the issues. I'm actually gonna just go to another topic real quick, and then we'll do Q&A because I think there's a couple of questions that we need to address. So just I wanted to remind people the Critical Race Theory webinar next Thursday at 7. Please go to 603alliance.org and I didn't edit the slide very well. Go to 603alliance.org and register for that. We expect to have a volunteer opportunity in early April, helping with a special election. Last time around, we mentioned an activist training on April 17th. That event is sold out, but I want to encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. We can notify you of the next event and get people some additional training in how to make a difference. I also wanted to mention something. So Ed was talking about, one of his first experiences, somebody presenting him with some returned letters that came back. They sent those to same-day registration voters. They came back undeliverable, no such person at this address. There are people working on efforts to do that right now in New Hampshire. There are cities and towns along the border that had very large number of same-day registrations. Derry is one of them. Derry had over 1,800 same-day registrations. I think somebody in the chat earlier mentioned that Manchester, one of the polling sites in Manchester, had no line for people who were registered, had a line around the block for same-day registrations. Those are not necessarily prima facie evidence of voter fraud, but they are something of concern that ought to be looked into. So a friend of ours, a friend of the 603 Alliance, is doing a postcard campaign. She has printed postcards. She has had them addressed with every same-day voter registration in her town, and she has just mailed them out to all of those same-day registrations. It will be interesting to see how many of those come back. Those could be a starting point to begin investigating. And as Ed said, I think Ed uses a lot of online sources. You go on LinkedIn, you just sort of do searches for people's names, and there's some other tools to try to figure out who's who and where they really live and what they're up to. So if you are interested in helping that effort, that is, as I said, a friend of ours who is doing that postcard campaign. She has put some of her own money into that and would love some financial help with it. If you are interested, email us. I will connect you with her, and then she can let you know how much she's still looking to raise to help fund that effort. So the 603 Alliance is not directly involved with that, but we'd like to see her succeed. There are other people launching similar efforts throughout New Hampshire. Another way you can help is support the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. That's Ed's group. Go to cnht.org. They also have an email list you can sign up for. You can also become a member of the 603 Alliance. There's a link. Again, my slide editing was not real good today. Alliance has 2 L's in it, but you can become a member, and we will send you a membership pin as pictured on the slide here. So with that, I want to kick off Q&A, and what I'm going to do is encourage people to use the chat. I am in a moment going to remove the block on unmuting yourself, so you will be able to unmute and ask your question if you prefer to do it that way. In the meantime, I guess I wanted to ask Ed a couple of questions. One is, somebody had asked, so if I get the voter checklist, what do I do with it? And one thing you could do with it, I said, was, you could do a kind of postcard or letter mailing to see how many of them come back undeliverable. You do that for the same day registrations. You could look through for people who've moved out of town but are still voting from your town, see if they voted. Another one was you can see if the same day registrations are listing legitimate addresses. Is it a huge apartment building and there's no apartment number listed? Is it Bear Brook State Park, which Ed mentioned earlier, at a time when Bear Brook State Park was closed for the season? Look for similar names. We had a person in the town where I live who recently tried to register twice. She did that by using a variation of her name. I think one with a full middle name and one with a middle initial, and she scribbled a birth date, hoping that no one would notice it was the same person. So those are what I wrote. My question to Ed is, what else? What have we missed? Is there anything else that people could do if they have a copy of that checklist to try to start to uncover potential voter fraud?
Well, it depends on your situation. I have a soulmate up north who's in a lake town. And he checked all the people that have summer homes on the lake and actually live in Massachusetts. And they have a group of people that are voting here. So he made that list public, the names public on some sort of an email I was on. I took those 6 names and I did a background search on them. And I contacted him and said, I'd like to use those names if I could. And he's, sure, let's work together. So I checked the names, and the third one down was a woman who works for the city of Cambridge. So right now I'm working with a radio talk show host. We're going to call her at work and ask her why she's voting here in New Hampshire. That's called street justice. And if no one likes it, then they can sue me. And then we can do this in public. And you can explain in a courtroom why you would be living in Cambridge and working for the city and then voting here. Things like that. If you work in a college town, go to the college. Police, whoever protects the college, that little police department, ask for the arrest records, arrest logs. You go to the town's police department, ask for those arrest logs, and match them with the voter checklist. And anybody who gave the police, either one, a driver's license as ID for getting pulled over for something or arrested for assault or whatever they did, anybody, if they're on a voter checklist and they voted in your town, but they gave the police a driver's license from another state, you got them. Give them to me. If it depends on what kind of community you're in. The smaller community, the easier it is to check. I have a guy that I'm holding. He's been voting in this small town for 30 years. He's been voting in Florida at his summer home for 20 years. He lives in Washington, D.C. And I turned him over to James O'Keefe, and O'Keefe went down to Florida. He sent a crew, and he's in a gated community, so we couldn't get to his door and knock on it. But uh, we're going to expose them at some point. It'll be fun. There's different ways to resolve this. They're all basically individual. You know what? Like the guy we caught from Connecticut that had stopped Governor Sununu in the hallway. This college kid, um, Ben Kremer. Ben Kremer was going to UNH, and he's a political activist involved in election law. He's an expert. So he had his problem is he's still registered to vote in Connecticut, and in Connecticut, I can see documents. I can see his voter registration card, which has his driver's license number on it because they have a state income tax. So we tried calling him at home. We tried calling his parents at home live on the radio, and no one would pick up. Sooner or later, I'm going to get one of these guys to pick up, and hopefully we'll get to interview them if they're that stupid. But street justice is all you have. I mean, yeah, contact me if you find something and say, look, here's some people that moved out a couple of years ago. I have right here on my desk, I have two people from Nashua, Linda Zimmon and David Tarbay. They sold their home and they moved into Florida, and the property records in Florida say that they are currently residents of Florida. So when they bought that, they moved into this place in Florida, they told the locals that this is where we live, and it's all signed by a notary and whatnot. And I sent certified mail to their home in Nashua that came back, no forwarding address. So all the records I have show that they voted here illegally in 2020, and I haven't checked 2018 yet, but I have to go dig into a past voter checklist to get that, and it revolves some work. But we're going to start calling them at home and say, hey, what are you doing voting here in New Hampshire? This is, W whatever it is that week. But it is entertaining to attempt to get these people on the radio. And hey, if that's voter intimidation, it's illegal to intimidate voters, but not voters that don't belong in your state. So welcome to the world of you're going to get exposed on the internet if you think you can get away from voting here just because the AG won't prosecute. That's the best advice I can give you. So, and there's some tips. If somebody wants to contact me, I can tell you over the phone what I would do, stuff I don't want recorded that makes a nice, easy catch.
So, Ed, are you planning on, or would you be interested in hosting a kind of a longer in-person session that would be kind of a step-by-step how-to going through some of these techniques?
Something where I can bring some documents. I have a checklist from my town hanging up right behind me, but we're not doing this visually.
Yep.
I can hold that up and show. Here's a checklist. Here's a marked checklist. All the goofy stuff you have to learn. You can't beat these people unless you speak their language. It's like when you go to court and you can't say this lawyer. You got to say opposing counsel. You got to speak their language to some degree to beat them. And when you're being lied to or misled, call them out right away. I have a debate I had with Peter Burling. He was a state senator for a long time, an attorney, and he made the mistake of debating me live on talk radio and eventually had to hang up, and he's never called the station back again. He was a regular on the station. So I have that people can listen to. You shouldn't be afraid to take these guys on. Once you have the background information, you become a very dangerous person to out-of-state voters. I recommend, it's a lot of fun when you catch one. So I would recommend everybody give it a try. Check your lists. Contact. I'm easily available. You can get me through the cnht.org. Jane will forward your questions to me, and let's do this together. I got this new guy up north. It's going to be fun. He's ruthless. He's very good at catching people up in his town. So, and I had a guy from ran a dump in one of the towns. He goes, I know who lives here and who doesn't because I run the dump. So it's things like that. Where do you look? And it's like going hunting. Where your quarry does what and what's their favorite habitat. So I'd say let's all do this together. Keep calling in the 603 Alliance. Join a group, any group. Get some neighbors and friends together. Don't sit back and be discouraged about this. We can beat them.
There's a lot of trial and error. I think with this kind of thing, you learn as you do it. But I think a lot of people could benefit from your experience, Ed. So let's talk offline. If you want to do something like that, we will definitely push that information out to the folks on the list and see if we can get people to spend some time with you and learn what you have to share. I want to go to David Strang. He's had his hand up for a bit. David, I'm also going to, in addition to whatever you're going to say, I want to ask a question. Somebody had asked about the LHS Dominion voting machines and whether anyone has had access to those since the election. So take it away.
Thanks, Jim. I actually was keeping an eye on a lot of the questions posed on chat, and I wanted to address those and hopefully save some time for people. So yes, the machines are secure. In those towns in New Hampshire that use machines to count votes, and that's 85% of New Hampshire's towns, they are owned by the towns. And towns keep them under lock and key. So the 4 Windham voting machines are locked up in their vault. They are secure. They are actually configured exactly the same way as they were for November 3rd, which is that they have the memory boards that were in place then. They were not swapped out for the March elections as they typically are. So they have not been touched since November 3rd. Now, when they do the audit, specifically LHS, which is the Salem, New Hampshire-based company that services these machines, they will not be allowed to participate. Obviously, there is a conflict of interest there. The election officials who operated the machines in Windham won't be allowed to participate. If we look at it very, very simply, that we have a machine count from November 3rd, which doesn't agree with a hand recount from November 12th, none of the people who participated in those 2 counts should be involved in the audit because they've got a conflict of interest. So, and then finally, yes, the audit will take place in public. The exact venue has not yet been determined. A lot of people would like to see it happen in Windham to minimize travel of the machines. Apparently there are some security concerns. So it may be in a different venue, but the machines will stay in the in the possession of Windham until the day of the audit. Just getting to the Secretary of State, I know Ken had some complimentary things to say. I have to say that neither the Secretary of State nor the Attorney General showed any initiative when it came to investigating this discrepancy. In fact, when Senator Guida put me on a 2.5-hour long conference call with the Secretary of State and Senator Jim Gray, who was chair of the Senate Election Law Committee, they were both quite content to say, well, the recount didn't change the outcome of the election, so nothing to see here, nothing to investigate. And this was entirely unacceptable to us. The Attorney General has similarly shown a lack of interest and has refused to do anything which is well within their legal responsibility to do. Hence the need for Senate Bill 43 to not only authorize but compel the Attorney General to investigate. But this lack of curiosity from the Attorney General's office, which Ed Naile did a great job of outlining, isn't just from our current Attorney General. This goes all the way back to at least when Kelly Ayotte was Attorney General, her successor Joe Foster, and then to Gordon MacDonald. They just are not interested in prosecuting this. And our Attorney General was rewarded by a nomination not just to the Supreme Court, but to the Chief Justice position of the Supreme Court, despite having no experience as a judge, having never tried a jury trial, and he was nominated and confirmed as the new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And I will tell you what's going to probably come very soon is we need to make the Attorney General an elected position. We need to hold these people accountable. It should not be an appointment. It should be an elected position so that we can keep these people honest. Thank you.
Absolutely. And David, I think there were a couple of questions. One had to do with transparency. There's a lot of questions that I'm sorry we can't get to all of them, but one had to do with transparency. Will people be able to observe what's happening with the forensic audit?
Yes, that is the plan. We would like to have some people right up close and personal, so that if they're looking, if, as the team is hand counting ballots, we want people right on their shoulder to say, "Yep, I agree. That's a ballot for Republican. That's a ballot for a Democrat." We don't want any of this 20 feet away behind a barrier stuff that you saw happen in other states. So, but we also want the public there to be able to view. And someone also asked if Colonel Waldron had been asked to be part of the audit team, and I can tell you that Ken Eyring has been right on top of this. He knows all the top people in this country. And I can reassure you that Colonel Waldron is one of the people that Ken would like to see on this audit team.
All right. So everybody does have the power to unmute. I guess I would, suggest if anybody wants to raise their hand and unmute or type a question in. We've unfortunately had quite a lot of questions. We do need to probably wind it down as we are. It's getting a bit late. But if there's one more question that people want to, actually, I do see one, and maybe we'll make that the last one. So, David, this is another one for you.
Okay.
Will the recount be just focused on the 4 state rep seats, or will there be other races covered in that investigation?
No, it will not just be a hand recount of the Rockingham 7 House of Representative races. Right now, we have a machine count from November 3rd that does not agree with the hand count from November 12th. So we are going to take all 10,006 ballots and insert them through each of the 4 machines and compare the counts. God help somebody if the 4 machines don't agree with each other. But then we're also going to repeat the hand recount for Rockingham 7. And if we're still getting the same results, then obviously it shows that there is something wrong with the machines, either accidentally or intentionally. But Senate Bill 43 was amended to make it stronger, folks. And it will also include a hand count of the DC Senate race, so the Shaheen Messner race, as well as the governor's race. What we would also like to see is for the ballots to be scanned into a device so that if we do need to look at anything after the fact, we have images of the ballots. We'll know how many ballots there were, because when they did the November 12th recount, the Secretary of State's team did not make a total of the number of ballots that they processed. Everyone who's looked at this has found this to be inexcusable, particularly since you have all 4 of the House candidates gaining 300 votes on average, and they don't even know how many ballots they processed. So we need to have a count, and just putting them through an optical scanner that will count each ballot one at a time would be a great way of doing that.
All right. Well, thank you, David, for your efforts. Thank you, Ed, for all of your efforts. Thank you for being on the call and answering questions and speaking to the audience tonight. Thank you, everyone, for being on the call and spending your time with us this evening. Please visit 603alliance.org to watch the recording and share the recording afterwards. We need to get the word out. We need to get involved. Sign up for our email list, and we will update you on additional developments as they happen. And of course, read granitegrok.com, where you can follow this updates on this and other news about things happening in the state and around the country. So thank you, everyone. I wish you all a very good evening.
Thanks, Jim.
Signing off, Jim.